I get how billionaire businessmen can send their kids abroad to study. How do you explain the president of China on a $22,000 a year official salary, paying for his only daughter to go to Harvard? How do you explain all these top Politburo officials who were on $22,000, $23,000 a year, sending their kids to some of the most expensive private schools and universities? How do they pay for that? So did Xi Jinping's daughter get a scholarship to go to Harvard?
I don't know. I assume she could have.
Because
この40年余り、中国の経済は世界最高水準といえる成長を遂げてきました。現在、中国は世界有数の経済大国となっています。
We observe an incredible rebalancing of the Chinese economy at a faster pace than anyone else.
ところが、2013年に習近平政権が発足すると、中国の方針は大きく変わりました。
我们要坚持党对人民軍隊的绝对領導。
習近平は汚職撲滅を掲げ、実際に数多くの摘発を行いました。しかし同時に政敵や反対勢力も次々と排除されました。軍事面でも強硬姿勢を強めていきました。
将不惜一切代價維護自己的領土主權和安全利益。
中でも深刻なのが人権問題です。100万人以上のウイグル人が再教育施設に収容され、深刻な人権弾圧への懸念の声が世界中から上がっています。
This appears to be the most intensive social re-engineering effort of the Chinese state since the Cultural Revolution.
本日、アルジャジーラのジャーナリストと中国の経済分野の高官とのインタビューが行われました。このインタビューを見た世界中の人々は驚きを隠せませんでした。
Chinese President Xi Jinping, whose government you've advised, said last year China is ready for a bloody battle against our enemies and kicked off 2019 by ordering the People's Liberation Army to, quote, prepare for a comprehensive military struggle. With who, Charles?
There's only one country that is sending warships into Chinese territory, that is threatening China with all kinds of things.
The United States?
The United States.
Last year, the Chinese government announced its biggest increase in military spending for 3 years, even though you already have a defense budget which is bigger than the UK, France, South Korea, and Russia combined. And yet you announced the biggest increase for 3 years. This is not just about words.
Oh, when the U.S. still continues to challenge, as they do, for entering Chinese territorial waters, however you look at it, the total amount, it is still insignificant compared to U.S. spending.
Insignificant, but you spend more than the UK, France, and Russia combined, 3 nuclear powers.
The 3 nuclear powers in terms of population, that's up to how many?
What's population got to do with your military spending? You have a big population, we know that. What's that got to do with your military budget?
Per capita spending is...
Oh, India has a huge population. They spend a quarter of what you spend.
They wish they had the money to spend more.
Okay. It's interesting you should say that because in 2018, a bunch of Asian countries, mainly your neighbors, were asked, would it be better to have, for the world, to have the US or China as the leading global power? 73% of Asian respondents, including Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Indonesia, favored the US versus 12% for China. Even with Trump as president, 77% of Filipinos say they prefer US leading the world to Beijing. That's pretty damning. To pick Trump over China, that's pretty damning, I would argue. Born in Taiwan, of course. Yes. If you still lived in Taipei today, in the Taiwanese capital, wouldn't you be worried at some of the rhetoric coming out of Beijing about annexation?
I wouldn't be at all.
Well, nothing.
Because I actually went to Taipei.
What does it take to worry you, Charles?
No, I went to Taipei for the midterm elections. What I see in Taipei or in Taiwan today is the people in Taiwan have gotten fed up with so-called independence politics. They're looking for better life. Well, why is it 170,000 engineers have left Taiwan and have gone to Shenzhen? Why is it all the 90% of the startups in Taiwan are aimed at the Chinese market and not the Taiwanese market? I think the fact that the economies have become so integrated between Taiwan and China, it leads to, let's say, the possibility of addressing the issue.
But my impression is that the young Taiwanese are actually quite worried that they may actually lose out in this process and also lose their de facto sovereignty as a liberal democratic island state.
But that is no longer considered a primary issue, even for the younger people.
Okay, let me bring in Steve Tsang, who's a British political scientist born in Hong Kong, currently director of the China Institute at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. Steve, is this a new form of aggressive foreign policy on China's part, or is that just an exaggeration on the part of China's enemies? What is China trying to do with its foreign policy? Is it trying to change the region, change the world?
After Xi Jinping became leader of China, what we are seeing is an assertive foreign policy that essentially amounts to China now requests and requires the rest of the world to pay China due respect. And what amounts to due respect is something to be judged by the Communist Party of China, or in effect by the leader of China, General Secretary of the Communist Party, Xi Jinping.
Okay.
China doesn't want to challenge the international order today, but China wants to have a better say, a larger say in the international order today. And I hope the rest of the world will respect China's request, because this is legitimate, this is legal, this is not revolutionary means to overthrow the international order.
Well, in the South China Sea, there's a debate about legality. Stephen, you're smiling there when Victor said they don't want to...
Well, China is not out there to change the international system as we know it at the moment, but it is transforming it. When the UN Agency for Human Rights was being changed, and then China played a leading role in the transformation, the creation of the Human Rights Council, and as it does so, it basically changes the discussions at the UN about human rights. Now China is not at much of the receiving end of criticism on human rights.
Charles, one of the reasons so many people abroad are worried about Chinese foreign and defense policies right now is because you have a president who at home appears to be bent on increasing his own power and reach. Chinese presidents since Mao, as you know, tended to serve 5 or 10 years in office. But President Xi has cracked down on his rivals, refused to designate a successor, and last year got rid of term limits. He's gearing up to be president for life, isn't he? Dictator in chief.
Okay, two things. Number one, it's a one-party system.
We don't...
And thank God. The key issue for the Chinese government is that they tried very hard over the years to maintain stability. You're claiming this president for life thing is precisely you don't understand how the system works.
Okay, explain it.
Now, take Hu Jintao, for example. During his second term was seen as lame duck for the entire second term. And he couldn't implement or execute a lot of things that he wanted to execute. It doesn't mean that he's actually going to continue for another term, but that prospect would take out the possibility of being regarded as lame duck.
But it does give him the option to serve for life legally within the system.
If it goes in that direction.
He does seem to be going in that direction.
Not necessarily.
Okay. Quick question though, on the vote last year in March, that was the vote in the National People's Congress to get rid of term limits, the delegates voted, 2,964 of them voted, 2 of them voted against. 2,959 voted in favour. Was that a free and fair election? I'm just wondering, 2,900 people just voted the way he wanted. Coincidence?
No, it was...
Is that how Chinese politics works?
Apparently that's how it works.
Okay. Good to hear such an endorsement of the system.
I think you should not be addressing the Chinese entire system of how it works in comparison to what you have in the West. You have to remember that 50 years ago, 90% of the population were illiterate. Only 10% was literate, or sophisticated or educated. The whole process of transforming that into a modern society is taken a long time.
By the way, lots of Chinese people weren't happy with the 2 term limits, and they took to Weibo and other online forums, and they were not allowed to. In fact, the Chinese government disallowed the words personality cult, my emperor, 2 term limit, Emperor Xi. They were all not allowed to use those words online to avoid people's dissatisfaction with this move.
You read Weibo?
I don't read Weibo, but others who read it for me.
Okay. Now, there are comments, there are views and comments describing their views and comments on this issue.
They got shut down.
It's not true. It got shut down because I wrote something on this as well.
Well, you wrote something critical of President Xi on Weibo?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. What did you write?
I said, this would not be regarded well by the Western press.
That's your definition of a criticism of the Chinese president. Nicely done, Charles. We've got to move on. Time is short. We want to talk about the economy in part two. Before we do, there's another big domestic issue that's grabbed a lot of headlines in recent months. Your country, the government you support and have advised, according to a UN rapporteur, according to the US State Department, according to Amnesty International, according to Human Rights Watch, according to plenty of journalists, and many others, are believed to have detained maybe 1 million people or more, mainly from the Uyghur Muslim ethnic minority, in re-education camps. 1 million people, Charles.
Okay.
1 million.
Okay. It's certainly not grabbing headlines in China.
Isn't that because you don't have a free press in China, so you can't have headlines about the Uyghurs? The world doesn't work on percentages. If you lock up 1 million people in camps, the world pays attention.
1.4 billion people need to be fed, need to be clothed,
That got to
need
lock
to be
up 1 million
educated.
people in Xinjiang. That must concern you to hear that 1 million people of your fellow Chinese countrymen and women have been locked
If
up
it's
by your
true,
government.
sure.
How do we establish if it's true or not? Why don't you let people in to check and count? Then we'll know for sure.
I think people have visited.
No, they've been on kind of supervised trips with Chinese monitors to select camps where they haven't been able to see everything. In fact, Reuters went on a trip last year. They were taken around, they were allowed to meet some people, and the people sang, "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." And Chinese government monitors stood in the room the whole time, and no one was allowed to speak to anyone independently.
well,
you know, Charles,
this
that
is not a-
there are people who've been in those camps, who have come out of those camps, are now refugees in the US, in Kazakhstan, and they have testified to hooding, shackling, torture, sleep deprivation, sexual humiliation, starvation. This is what's coming out from people who've been in those camps in Xinjiang.
If it's true, then it's certainly very bad. This is not my area of expertise, and I'm not involved in the politics, and I've never been to Xinjiang. I'm more concerned about the economic side.
But let me bring in Victor Gao, who is a very well-known Chinese political commentator. Even Chinese government officials have admitted that there are these camps, there are people locked up for quote-unquote re-education, but in the most horrific conditions, and we're talking up to 1 million people, Victor. How can you justify that?
The Uyghur people are our brothers and sisters. I have many friends among the Uyghur people. Among the Muslim people in China, they are a minority. Most of them are great Chinese nationals, that's for sure. However, among the Uyghur Muslims, there are extremists, there are separatists who want to split Xinjiang away from China. In China, under the Chinese law, anyone attempting to separate any part of Chinese territory outside of China is committing a crime. We need to be fully aware of this legal issue. We cannot tolerate anyone to do that.
No, I'm wondering, why not lock them up? Why lock up 1 million people?
First of all, altogether in Xinjiang, there is less than 10 million Uyghur people. If you are really serious in believing that there is 1 million people among the Uyghurs who are locked up in so-called camps, this is completely fabricated.
How many people are locked up?
I do not know.
For education
Xinjiang.
purposes, Kairat Samarkand, who was one of the people who managed to get out of a camp, he says that we were forced to sing political songs and study speeches of the Chinese Communist Party. We were forced to chant, "Long live Xi Jinping," before we were given our meals.
Allow me to say one thing for sure. No one in China is saying long live Xi Jinping. So whatever report you are quoting is false to start with.
Here's what I don't get, Victor. The UN, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the US State Department, various China experts, human rights activists have come up with this number of 1 million based on satellite photography, based on people who have come out and talked about it. You're saying it's not 1 million. I'm asking very simply, how many is it?
I think we need to just differentiate the realities on the ground versus the falsified claims.
So refugees, Uyghur refugees who've talked about being tortured in camps, they're just making it up according to you?
I think lots of these claims are falsified.
Wow.
That's for sure.
And you're a friend of the Uyghur people. Okay, undoubtedly, the Chinese economy has been a success story in many ways. Record growth, millions of people lifted out of poverty. I don't think anyone questions that. But there are, of course, as you know, serious concerns about the sustainability of the Chinese economic miracle, how long it's going to last. The jobs market's gotten a lot tougher. Exports and imports have slowed down. The Chinese stock indexes, I believe, lost almost a quarter of their value last year. Even the trade war with the US seems to be taking its toll. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end of the Chinese economic miracle?
The Chinese economy is transforming. It is moving from cheap labor manufacturing for Fortune 500 companies to a significantly meaningful domestic market. and domestic consumption.
Okay. One thing that's been a consistent trend in China that's just been getting worse and worse over the last few decades is inequality that seems to be spiraling out of control in your country. There were 89 new Chinese billionaires in 2018 alone. That's almost 2 new billionaires a week, while tens of millions of people still live in poverty. Why is a self-styled communist society producing so many billionaires and so much income inequality?
Well, I think it's the value creation in society as a whole. Deng Xiaoping said, let some people get rich first.
According to a recent study by the European think tank Bruegel, quote, the large and persistent income gap is partly the fault of China's tax and transfer system and, quote, very generous personal income tax allowance and exemptions that favor high-income individuals. You're a high-income individual, aren't you, Charles? You've benefited from this tax system, haven't you? While other Chinese haven't.
There are two aspects to this. New tax laws have just been implemented, which is supposed to be much more fair. Second is, it's very, very difficult to have a transforming society that is changing so rapidly and to have a taxing system that fits in every stage of development. If you look at China in the 1980s, early 1990s, it was basically cheap manufacturing, and then it moved into something else.
And yet today, the Article 1 of the Chinese Constitution still says that the People's Republic of China is a socialist state led by the working class. That's just a completely false description of China today. You're not led by the working class and you're not really a socialist state.
Yeah, we're certainly not as socialist as Norway and Finland and Sweden.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of the rich Chinese and what they're up to. The Huron Group, very well-respected research company, did a survey of high net worth individuals in China, rich millionaires and they found that almost half the number of rich Chinese are planning to move away from China to protect their fortunes and to get better educations for their kids. A lot of Chinese billionaires, millionaires, as you know, I mean, you keep going on about the West. A lot of the rich people in your country are obsessed with the West. They buy houses in the West, they send their kids to school in the West, they buy Western art at ridiculous prices. How come?
It's part of investment. I buy things in the West as well.
1 in 6 said they wanted to move because of the political environment in China. 1 in 5 said they want to protect their assets. 3/4 said they want their children to have a better education. Not a great vote of confidence in China from its richest people.
Okay.
I get how billionaire businessmen can send their kids abroad to study. How do you explain the president of China on a $22,000 a year official salary paying for his only daughter to go to Harvard? How do you explain all these top Politburo officials who are on $22,000, $23,000 a year sending their kids to some of the most expensive private schools and universities? How do they pay for that?
If you went purely by SAT scores, that 80% of the population of the UC system will be Asian. They happen to be better students and they get scholarships.
So did Xi Jinping's daughter get a scholarship to go to Harvard?
I don't know. I assume she could have.
Because you know that his family, according to a Bloomberg study, are found to be billionaires. His brother-in-law's name appeared in the Panama Papers. The Chinese political elite is riddled with corruption, as you well know.
And that's something that has been in the process of being addressed the last 4 years.
What does that say about your model that the Chinese government has rounded up 2 million people, Communist Party officials, have been disciplined for corruption in recent... What about the president and the Politburo? He seems to only arrest people who are not in his inner circle. The people he likes never seem to get arrested.
Not true.
Really? Can you name an ally of the president who he's landed up recently?
Who's an ally, who's not?
Okay, let's go to the audience who've been waiting very patiently. Raise your hands, wait for a microphone to come to you. Let's go to lady here.
Thank you very much. I am Uyghur. I have been cut off from speaking to my family since beginning of 2017, just like many thousands of Uyghurs living overseas. And my question to you, Mr. Liu, does it really bother or concern you that the country that you made home after renouncing your Taiwanese citizenship is criminalizing the entire Uyghur people and implementing policies that major Western news organizations, lawmakers, and legal scholars have described as crimes against humanity? Thank you.
First of all, I have Uyghur friends. If it's valid that there are things which are not properly done, of course it's not good. Of course it's not good.
Speak to her family. Is that propaganda? I'm just asking. This lady said...
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Victor wants to jump in. Go on, Victor.
No, for this outstanding lady, I would say if you are a Uyghur, I would treat you as a brother or sister, the same as I would treat the majority of the people among the Uyghur people. Secondly, if I can give you one piece of advice, I would say several things. If any of your Uyghur brothers and sisters and relatives are Communist Party members in China, then by party discipline, they are not allowed to go to a mosque. If they want to go to a mosque, fine, resign from the Communist Party of China. So the government in China has a discipline. If you are a Communist Party member of China, don't go to a mosque, go to the Buddhist temple, don't go to a Catholic
Before I
church.
go back to the audience, I need to ask you a follow-up on this. There are now reports, which haven't been really denied by the Chinese government, that the Communist Party that you talk about is sending Han Chinese people to live in Uyghur houses, to watch them 24/7 as they eat, drink, pray. Is that fake news as well?
There is no problem in believing in Islam. I have many Islamic friends.
Okay,
in
you have
China.
Uyghur friends, you have Muslim friends, I get it.
No, however...
Do you have people living in your house against your will?
No.
Because a lot of Uyghurs do right now.
However, if anyone in China misuses Islam as a pretext to split Xinjiang away from China, that's a crime.
Are there people
So
living in
don't
Uyghur
commit a crime.
homes in Xinjiang right now on behalf of the Communist Party?
That I'm not aware of. I've never been inside the family of a Uyghur friend.
Unfortunately, a lot of Chinese Communist Party members have. In the beginning of the show, you were telling me, oh, India wishes they could spend what we spend on defense. But is that really something to brag about when you spend, I think, 5% of your GDP on health and 2% on education, which is lower than what Sudan spends on health and education as a proportion of the budget? That's pretty embarrassing for a country your size,
Absolutely.
your wealth,
I think,
calling itself socialist, abandoning the poor people when it comes to health and education.
I think health and education spending should be more. In terms
Why hasn't it been?
It's been increasing significantly.
But why is it so low? In a country that claims to care about the working class.
It could be spending more, sure.
I lost contact with my old families since early 2017. And I recently found out my siblings, and they are in that so-called concentration camps. And I don't know, are they still alive or not? And secondly, I don't know my mother's she is well, and why I'm not allowed to communicate with them, and also why they not allowed my mother and my relatives to contact with me, and why my mom must suffer from not seeing and hearing from their sons. Okay. That's my question.
That's a statement. I have no idea about his
Well, let
mother.
me turn it into a question. When you hear such stories, aren't you concerned as a citizen of China as to what might be going on in your country?
Yes, I am.
And when you go back to China, you're going to do anything about it?
I'll find out more about the subject.
It is good practice for the Chinese government to have full control over the information its citizens view online.
Should the Chinese government control the flow of information to citizens?
I think there should be some measure of control, including in the United States.
But total control in China?
That should be lessened. That should be reduced.
You'd like to see it reduced in China?
Yeah.
Do you think it will be?
In some cases, it has been.